Now that there's no more hostages in Gaza, does that mean that Hamas does not have any more leverage?
Hamas will never be disarmed until they are completely eradicated. There are now estimates that the length of tunnels in Gaza, under Gaza, total 1,000 miles.
That's a genocide, but let's just not worry about that, because the genocide we want to talk about is the one that's taking place in Gaza when the Jews are killing the poor Palestinians. Shalom, everyone. Well, we are in the middle of a big snowstorm. This is when this is being recorded, but this is not going to stop us because there is so much to cover. I just couldn't pick one or two topics today, so we're just going to make it a prophecy, current event update, and see where this goes, because there's a lot to cover. As always, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing if you already have not. And also, you can follow us on Telegram. I post regularly. And you can, of course, on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, Olivier Melnick or Shalom and Messiah. You will find us one way or the other. And also, there's my new book that you'll get a little link on the bottom of the screen to get it on Amazon. I recommend you get it because it covers a lot of what's going on right now on antisemitism in the Middle East and in the world in the end times. And there's also a trip to Israel coming real soon that you don't want to miss with Pastor Tom and Pastor Brendan. And you have a way to register through this video as well. So all this being said, I want to bring my guest. And of course, if I'm going to do a prophecy update, I need to bring my good friend, John Haller. So, John, good morning.
Hi, Olivier. You've heard of John the Revelator. I'm John the Updater.
John the Updater. There you go.
Now, that's John, actually my Instagram handle, by the way.
Oh, it is?
I don't use it. I don't post anything there, but I grab that handle.
So John, the current the picture that we usually have behind you is the Temple Mount with the dome and the Eastern Gate, and you chose to have a different background. What are we looking at?
Looking at my backyard, and that's with about 21 inches. You can see the little bench over here.
Right.
I can't. There you go. Yeah. And it's that's about 21 inches of snow that we got Saturday night, Sunday. So I got up to, we decided late Saturday night to cancel church because it was looking like we were going to get 3 or 4 inches during church, which can make problematic. We're out in the country. And then they were telling us we're going to get 3 to 6 inches. I got up at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. like I usually do on Sunday. And there were about 2 inches. By the time church started, you helped me out by doing a live stream sort of panel with Mark Sutherland and Brian Schrager. And we did, by then we had about somewhere around a dozen inches when we finished that, and we ended up getting about 9 more.
Wow.
Yesterday afternoon. So it's a pile of snow. Even Ohio State has canceled classes and everything for 2 days. So everything is shut down here. So I have nothing else to do, so why not do something with you?
Oh, so you mean our 45-minute podcast could be like a 5-hour? It would not affect your schedule?
Yeah, I think I might be able to squeeze that in.
Yes, you know what?
Be careful what you wish for.
I know. This is John Haller I'm talking to. I know.
What was the line I loved in Out of Africa, which was a miserably boring movie, but Meryl Streep was doing a voiceover at the beginning, and she said, when the gods want to punish you, they give you your dreams. So if your dream is to have me for 5 hours, you might actually get it.
Okay, well,
and it would be a punishment.
Yes, a dream or a nightmare, I don't know. Well, I want to do something first. We always bring current events. We try to connect some dots with Bible prophecy and Israel end times. But something happened literally right before you and I got together for this podcast. We're talking about. I mean, this is recorded on January 26th. You know, I usually don't give the date, but this is significant because today, I'd say probably about from now that we were recording, maybe a couple hours ago, the last body of the hostages. I believe it was a total of 265, if I'm correct. The last body was recovered, and his name was Rangvili, and he was recovered, and forensic had done its work, and and when I got the news, it was like it was from somebody on WhatsApp that I'm following a channel on WhatsApp, and this lady sent the news from Israel, and I immediately sent you a text, and I'm going like, "Hey, John, have you heard this? This is what I heard just happened." And then you a little while later told me, "Well, Bibi removed his yellow ribbon at the Knesset."
Yeah, he was giving a speech at the Knesset and said, we can do, we've been wearing this while the hostages were
Right.
in Gaza, and they consider the dead hostages hostages,
Right. So
and
I see. Here it is. I've been wearing mine off and on my different shirts and garments, and my wife too as well. So I'm officially now taking my little yellow ribbon, and this was for the 265 hostages. They're all being brought home now. This immediately raised a question in my mind, John. Now that there's no more hostages in Gaza, um, it raised a couple of questions. Number one, does that mean that Hamas does not have any more leverage? And because I really thought that this last body was not going to be recovered for as long as they could hold it. And number two, the timing of it. I mean, over the weekend, over the last few days, Trump pushed, really literally pushed the phase two of the peace plan, really prematurely. I don't even think it's going to work, and we need to talk about that a little bit, but prematurely pushed it through since not all requirements had been met until this morning.
well,
But then again, it's not all requirements because on the from the perspective of the hostages, this has been met finally. But now we have to talk about the disarmament and demilitarization and disarmament of Hamas. How realistic is that? What do you think of the timing?
um, it sounds very depressing to say, but Hamas will never be disarmed until they are completely eradicated. I don't think we understand as things have come out, and Israel's been at this for 2 years. This is a very sophisticated, organized terrorist group. They have created the most uh, complicated terror base in the history of humanity. There are now estimates that the length of tunnels in Gaza, under Gaza, total 1,000 miles. Gaza is, you've been down there, it's 40 miles north to south, 5 to 8 miles wide. And there's 1,000 miles of tunnels. It far exceeds anything in the London subway, the New
New
York
York.
City subway system, maybe combined. And it's interesting. And I can't remember who did the podcast that I was listening to the other day, somebody from Israel. And his point was that we gave them this money, and the goal was back in 2005 to 2007, as things kind of settled, were who was going to be in charge of Gaza was determined, and it ended up being Hamas. That they had all this money. We've seen the plans of Jared Kushner, Operation Spring or whatever, the Gaza Lago, whatever you want to call it. And I'm wondering what, like, the amount of steel and concrete that was taken to build this terror underground structure, what logistically was that the same amount of stuff that was used to build, could have been built could have built Gaza, could have turned Gaza into the Singapore of the Mediterranean. That didn't happen. And it was because the Hamas wanted Israel to attack it this way. That's why they built underground. That's why they did what they did. That's why they used their people as human shields and continue to do that. So even today, as we record this, there's pretty good evidence that Hamas still controls 40% of Gaza. They've reconstituted themselves. They're putting in place the same people, the same type of people that Israel has killed and assassinated. So we need to dispel ourselves of the notion that there can be any peace with Hamas. Hamas needs to be completely eradicated. And what I mean by that, and I know we're Christians, but we have to be realistic. Every single one of them needs to be dead. And even then, you have a problem because they're training people in this ideology. It continues to go. But it's not just happening in Gaza. You're in Israel a lot. I've been in Israel a couple of times in the past few months. All over the area that the world calls the West Bank, we call it Judea and Samaria. This is the same problem there.
Same ideology. Yeah.
And there are tunnels there as well. And they're flying weapons in with drones from Jordan and elsewhere on guns and that type of thing. And so the whole situation is incredibly volatile. And the problem is, if you talk about it in very stark terms, immediately people will say you're a racist or whatever, but I'm just like, I'm a realist. Okay. They sort of have a lot of the same letters, but I don't know how the problem gets solved. I don't think anybody has an answer.
Well, what's
I
puzzling,
do know the answer.
what's puzzling to me is that when I think about this conversation that you and I just had, and in a sense, your panel yesterday, we talked about some of the same things where the ideology is going to be in the way for as long as the ideology exists, and that's the ideology of Islamism and Sharia law and global caliphate and whatnot, and that's what runs Hamas, and that's also, by the way, 77%, 75% of all Palestinians, air quotes around the word Palestinians, um, uh, agree with that, with what Hamas is doing, and Hamas has their support one way or the other. So it's not just Hamas; it goes beyond that. But it's not possible that you and I and a few others would be the only ones to see this. I know that the U.S. government, I know that the world government, they understand the gravity of what's going on, and they understand that ideology is toxic, and there's nothing that can be done, especially not through what we've been repeatedly talking about, the art of the deal, and Donald Trump is going to rebuild the region and disarm, and it's do you think Donald Trump doesn't even see that?
Yeah. So here's the deal with the Board of Peace and the Gaza plans. It's repeating the same mistakes over again that have failed in the past. So, for example, they talk about the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, to which now they're inviting in Muslim Brotherhood countries to help staff that, like Turkey and Qatar. This is absolute, complete, total insanity. But they want this ISF. And then Trump comes out with this Board of Peace, and it can only be graciously described as Trump going to replace the UN with himself at the head. That's what it says. It's he's appointed for life. He can only be removed by a unanimous vote. of all these people on the board of peace. Well, what do you think the odds of that are? And he'll appoint a successor, and I suspect Trump successor would be Jared Kushner. He seems to be leading the charge on all of this. But they want this international stabilization force. So I don't know, Olivier, I've been up to Metula at the Lebanon border. And you
Yeah,
go up to the,
I was there recently. I was there in
okay.
August.
And you go up there to the observation point. They're sort of at the high point above Metula. And there's the big listening post there that was attacked many times by Hezbollah. And you can see rockets laying around up there that were shot in, or parts of rockets. But the one thing you see when you're up there is you look out in the area of the border fence, which is not really super strong or anything like that. It's a big concern. But you see the UNIFIL, the UN forces. I don't know what UNIFIL stands. Well, anyway,
International something.
yeah, International Expeditionary Forces. And as one commentator I heard recently said, the thing you need to worry about UNIFIL is they're pretty good at sexually abusing people where they are brought in. They don't really do much for peace. But the problem is that they have bases along the Lebanon border, and those bases along the Lebanon border were used by Hezbollah and Iran as shields for Hezbollah bases along the Lebanon border. Now take that experience and go down to Gaza and rename it the International Stabilization Force, where they have to have bases. These bases are going to be used by any existing Hamas people as a shield or a way to infiltrate and get closer to Israel. This happens over and over and over again. It's
And
insanity.
so we haven't learned anything, or is it greed that basically is Trump so blinded by his desire to be the peacekeeper of the planet that he'll do anything, even things that he knows are not going to work?
It could be. I mean, being seen as the great peacekeeper. So look, I'm willing to call his bluff. Okay, so if we're playing a poker game, I said, I see your board of peace, President Trump, and I raise you as you now own all attempts at peace in the entire world. If you want that, we'll give it to you, and we will judge you on that basis.
You know, I talked to one of our IDF assets in Israel 2 days ago. I think it was on Shabbat, around the weekend. And I asked him. I said, "What's going on?" Because he's in and out of Gaza, and he was in Jerusalem when I called him. And I said, "What do you think is going on with the Board of Peace?" He goes, "Well, I think they're putting everything in place so that Hamas and the Palestinians will have everything delivered to them on a platter to do what's right. And at the first bad move, then the U.S. and Israel and whoever is joining them will have a reason to basically go after them." And I'm thinking, well, I mean, that sounds great on paper, but I don't think it's realistic.
How many times are we going to do this?
Well, the threats, I mean, Trump has given, I mean, how many times did he draw a line in the sand in the last 2 years?
Well, it's a big trench now. If he's drawing it in the same, and it's difficult. Look, I'm gracious enough to admit this is an incredibly difficult thing, but with regard to Hamas and the ideology that drives them, which is the same as the ideology that drives the Palestinian Authority, how many times are we going to say, well, if we just give them economic opportunity and prosperity, the problem will go away? We need to completely disabuse ourselves of this notion that something is going to be different.
Well, look at Qatar. I mean, they're one of the richest country in the world. Are they not subsidizing terrorism?
They do. And I mean, I've told you this before. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. in September of 1993. And I had to stay, because of travel arrangements, I stayed over a day and went down and saw one of my good friends from high school was a newly elected Democratic congressman, Jewish, from Arizona. And we talked because the day before he was so excited, he had been at the White House for the signing ceremony of the Oslo Accords. So let's just start from the Oslo Accords and why do we keep doing this?
So we're going back, what, 1988?
1993.
Oh, 1993. Okay. Yeah.
September 13th, 1993.
Something else, 1980. I had 1988 in my head for some reason. 1993. Okay.
It's hard to keep them straight because we also have the 1972 attack on the Israeli Olympic team at Munich. I remember watching that. I was a freshman in college watching that unfold. And how many times do we have to do this? And by the way, look at Jordan and Egypt. They will not take any of the so-called Palestinians. They don't want them. Jordan kicked them out. The whole Black September thing, which led to Munich, was done by King Hussein, King Abdullah II's father, yeah. King Hussein, because of the problem that they have. This is kind of an interesting, we kind of off topic a little bit here. Olivier, you've been all over Israel, right?
Yeah.
When you go through the Palestinian areas, what do you see everywhere? New apartment buildings. The building in Israel's off the charts. It's mind-boggling to us when we see it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in the Palestinian areas. All these new apartment buildings. So I was in Nablus, actually in Nablus. People say you're crazy, in 2017 with Joel Kramer. And I saw the building. I was just on Mount Ebal at Joshua's altar, and then up at Mount Gerizim, overlooking Nablus. And the number of new apartment buildings is shocking to me. In the Palestinian Arab area. But when you stand there, so I was standing there with one of the Israel guys, Josh Waller, at the overlook there on Mount Gerizim, looking down on Shechem, Joseph's tomb, Shechem, and the church over Jacob's well.
Right.
Right next to the tell at Shechem is called Tel Balata. Balata is a giant refugee camp in Nablus. It is still there and populated with all these new apartment buildings around. What is going on? This is a political, leftist, Marxist, Islamic, psychological operation. They don't need to be there anymore. Even in Syria, Yarmouk was one of the most densely populated square miles on planet Earth. Maybe 400,000 people. Trump uses words to describe places like this. It's been there, it's been destroyed, pretty much destroyed now, but because it was Sunni Muslims that lived there and Assad wanted to get rid of them with the Russians. But it existed there for 70 years. Why do we keep doing this? And so I'm sort of, as we were talking, I've been talking here, I'm having this thought. We know the scripture tells us there will be great delusion in the end times. This is part of the great delusion. I have no doubt in my mind about it.
No question about it. No question about it. The great delusion, the irrationality of a lot of things that appear to be rational to people, but they're not. No, absolutely. And I think that's part of, on a bigger picture, part of the, connected also to the great apostasy, and of the church. But we're definitely entering a time now where very little is making sense. And but I'm looking at that's so true. This concept of give them autonomy, give them let them grow their infrastructure and have businesses, and it's just let them grow financially, and it's just not going to work. I mean, we have examples in the Middle East, and the ideology takes over. It controls everything. And I want to shift a little bit because it's connected, but it's a different topic. I want to shift to Iran because now we're going on what 3 weeks of what we could call a people's revolution. We get
or a massacre by the regime.
yes, I mean I've heard numbers. I've heard lately, like in the last couple of days, 40,000. You've heard even more than that. Rumors that it could be double that.
100,000, 80 to 100,000.
Yeah,
And by the way, that's dead. There are, by any estimates, at least 300,000 injured and 20,000 in prison.
but
I
it's
mean, so run those numbers. That's a genocide.
oh yeah, that's a genocide. But let's just not worry about that because the genocide we want to talk about is the one that's taking place in Gaza when the Jews are killing the poor Palestinians. That's the one that really the world is interested. But what's happening in Iran? Complete silence. It is so disgusting, so
But
disgusting.
Gaza City, by the way, just to go back to Gaza for a moment, Gaza City is I've been there to set a road and looked over into Gaza City, and there's a lot of destruction, but there's still a lot of things intact down there. And that's where Hamas is based. That's where they don't really control that, and so it's a difficult thing. So anyway, so back to Iran.
Well, yeah,
Listen,
I mean, how close are we? Do you think from I mean, a lot of aircraft carriers are coming into the region on a daily basis now. So, uh, are we looking at another hit from the U.S. and or Israel or both in the very near future? What do you think?
well, back in June when this happened, when they did the thing on with the nuclear
June 12th.
facilities, yeah, and the Trump answered the question I thought was the question I would pose for a title for one of my updates would to be two or not to be two. And they did the B2 thing back in June. They took out a lot. I mean, there was a huge infrastructure for intelligence built by Israel within Iran. Now, I don't know what that infrastructure looks like right now. There's a lot of people internally in Iran that oppose the regime, and Israel will exploit that, and I'm fine with that. But so they took these out. They took out a lot of the leadership of the scientific community. Parts of the IRGC were killed. I have this one picture where it's a stack of 40 coffins, literally stacked like cordwood, of Hamas or of IRGC and nuclear scientist leadership in Iran. They had a big funeral for them. But nothing's changed. Iran still is progressing with missiles. We've seen over the past week, we've seen 16 giant military aircrafts with supplies landing in Tehran. We've seen a bunch of them from Russia over the last few weeks, and the regime, now. So my understanding as of a couple of days ago, the regime is now no longer returning bodies to families in Iran. For a while, they were charging them money to get the bodies back. Now they're holding all the bodies. Why are they doing that? Because if Israel or Iran, the United States attacks, they will drop all those bodies and say, look at the carnage caused by Israel and the United States.
Oh, so they're dead bodies, but they're using them as a blanket to cover themselves.
Right. It's a propaganda tool now. We have to understand that even if the number is 40,000, I think even the UN said like 37,000 dead in a very short period of time. This is things that I don't even know that they were killed like this at this rate. And they're saying that 20,000 of these were done in 2 or 3 days, like around January 8th or 9th. So now we're about 2.5 weeks out. The internet's shut down. Things are getting out. On January 25th, the New York Times did publish, I think it's probably not behind the paywall, an excellent article sort of evaluating this. The New York Times does this every now and then. And so I think they did a pretty good job on this. I mean, they throw in, well, Trump promised he was going to do something, and that brought people out into the streets. And so here's the question, Olivier. I think this is the question you want: is what's the response? Why hasn't Israel or the United States or both of them together done something? And I think it's a very difficult situation. So there are different scenarios. So let's say there is a decapitation strike done on the regime. I don't think that just taking out Khamenei is sufficient. His son, his one son, really runs the show. If you do a strike and you kidnap Khamenei and you don't get the son, it's a complete, utter failure. So, but let's say they get the Khomeinis and the mullahs, that run Iran. Well, then what's the scenarios? The scenarios are that the revolution people will be able to rise up. They don't have guns and everything, and defeat the regime and prevent any replacement regime. And Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, who was deposed in the 1979 revolution,
Reza Pahlavi, yeah.
Yeah, Reza Pahlavi. That's one solution. But I don't know if he has enough broad support. And I think Trump has said this. I don't know if he has enough broad support across Iran to do it. And I understand leaving the mullahs in charge is very bad. But you also have to consider the consequences of taking out the mullahs. So you might get Pahlavi as a new Shah and set up a constitutional democracy. We pray that would be something that would occur. But you could also have the IRGC come in stronger than ever and take over. Or another thing that could happen is the whole country, and just talking 90 million people, could descend into a civil war. We have recent experience of a civil war in that region of the world, and that is Syria. That Syrian civil war started in March of 2011. It started in Deraa in southern Syria. I happened to be 30 miles away at the southern end of the Sea of Galilee that day. And it was strange because there I am sitting in Israel where the Sea of Galilee that day was like a glass, It was beautiful. And 30 miles away, Syria was melting down. That led to a Syrian civil war where millions and millions were displaced. At least 1 million people were killed. ISIS rose up. We remember it's been carnage and a bloodbath. And over the past 3 weeks, as the al-Shara, formerly al-Jilani, now al-Shara, and I will give her credit, there's a former member of Knesset who does a lot of commentary work on I-24 News, Ruth Wasserman Landi. And she's very articulate. She's been in the diplomatic corps. And she said, she calls him al-Sharia.
Yeah, that's not much of a stretch.
No, I know, but it's a very clever, slight twist of the words. And you could say, well, maybe she stumbled over it. She didn't.
Well, back in the days when Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran,
right.
We used to call him, Mahmoud Amin al-Jihad.
Right. Or I'm mad about jihad is how I kind of refer to him.
So anyway,
and by the way, he's still around. But so it could be a civil war, or it could be somebody else come in and take over. And so we've watched Turkey unfold. So let me just kind of shift a little bit to the west and north and talk about Turkey, Syria, and all that other stuff. So look, Erdogan, I'm hearing reports that he's not doing well. He's declining physically. One of my hopes in life right now is that Erdogan's life will always be shorter than mine. He's 2 days younger. So he'll turn 72 the end of February 26th. And by the way, I'm not asking for birthday cards or anything by saying that, but he's 72. But I'm telling you, my X feed is full of Turkish accounts that love Erdogan. But look at what Erdogan has done. I mean, he's been in power for 20 some years. He's Muslim Brotherhood. There's no doubt about that. He's buddies with Qatar, is a big funder of Muslim Brotherhood. Turkey is the muscle. He's involved in Libya, Sudan, Somalia. Now they've got these kind of entering into an alliance with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan to form what they're calling a Middle East NATO, which has sort of joint defense obligations. If somebody attacks Pakistan, the other guys will come in. Saudi Arabia's military is not that formidable, but Turkey's is. Turkey's is the largest military in NATO outside of the United States. And the technological advancements that Turkey is making in the defensive military arenas is stunning. But what happened on December 8th, 2024 was very significant, both from a geopolitical and in our community, a Bible prophecy standpoint, when Damascus fell to Sunni Islamic jihadists led by al-Jilani / al-Sharia. That was a very significant thing. Now, Ruth Wasserman Landy, who I referred to, she did an interview on the 1-year anniversary, and she said, I don't think there is any longer a Syria. It no longer exists. It's a facade. Turkey is in charge. I think that was a very astute observation. A few weeks ago, I heard the great David Wormser, both Ruth Wasserman Landy and David Wormser at the Mizgov Institute. You should go read their page. He said that the fall of Damascus to the Sunni Muslims was really the first time that Sunni Muslims had taken charge of Damascus in over 1,000 years.
Sorry.
And so the fall of Damascus was very significant. Damascus was the geopolitical and religious capital of the greatest Islamic dynasty or empire called the Umayyad dynasty. There's the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. And so when al-Sharia took over in December of 2024, he ascended into the pulpit to speak at the Umayyad Mosque, just like al-Baghdadi had done at the mosque in Mosul when ISIS took over Mosul. These are very significant. And Wormser's point is that the Sunni mind believes that they lost control of the Umayyad dynasty because they got away from the purity of the Umayyad version of Islam. Now that is being restored by Qatar, Muslim Brotherhood, Erdogan. They've taken over Syria, and now I'm seeing some reports, can't say that they're entirely true. So what did they do over the last 2 weeks? They've gone after the Kurds, which Erdogan has always wanted to get rid of.
Right.
He considered, and there are some Kurds who are terrorists. Okay.
They when you say they've gone, you mean Syria and Turkey.
Syria and Turkey.
Right.
And so now, and they're ethnically cleansing it. They're taking Kurdish women captive as sex slaves. It's very similar.
Wait. You mean another genocide?
Yes.
But who cares, right? Because no Jews, no news.
Yeah. And so it's, and there's no protest about what's happening in Iran anywhere. Not a peep. In fact, you go to Arab press. I read a lot of Arab newspapers. I'm grateful for Google and translation tools. They hardly talk about Iran. It's almost like Iran doesn't even exist. They talk about Iran all the time when they were launching missiles into Israel. Now all of a sudden, Iran, is that someplace close to us? It's an amazing thing to watch. But now there's this report. So the Trump administration's main guy on these issues is Thomas Barak. He is Lebanese. He was a big lobbyist for the United Arab Emirates. Uh, I I will just say I talked to somebody in Israel who grew up in Lebanon and Syria, and she said Barack is as corrupt as anybody she's ever seen. So I'm still unpacking that, but let's just assume that that might be true. But now the word is that the United States government has maybe been backing off on Iran because there's some indication that Turkey, because they're getting the Kurds, they may move into Iraq and then sort of provide ground forces to take over Iran.
Huh.
Okay, that's by the way,
That's one scenario.
and that's also a scenario that you can extract if you think it's future from Daniel chapter 8. So go look at everybody go read Daniel chapter 8 and look at what's going on in the relationship between Turkey maybe moving in to take over Iran. That's a fourth or fifth possibility. And there's some indication that this is why Trump has backed off, because there are people in the Trump administration that are, what's the best way to say this, carrying a lot of water for Turkey. And Trump seems to respect Erdogan a lot because he's a strong man. So I'm just saying that's a scenario that may be unfolding that may be directly related to the prophetic scriptures, depending on how you read them.
Right.
Because it talks about Javan, which is like, I believe, Western Turkey, and the ram goat prophecy of
Daniel 8.
Daniel 8. And so we know that, Alexander the Great, that was a fulfillment
Right.
of it, but we know how these scriptures are a lot of times patterns and they seem to repeat. And it may very well be, some believe, I tend to believe, and others, that this Daniel 8 thing will be repeated in any times. And when you look at it, the one thing that happens is it comes from the West and it comes very quickly. I'm just throwing this at, is what we're seeing unfolding in the Middle East in geopolitical terms, historical terms, is it happening quickly?
Very quickly.
Yeah, it's kind of stunning. So there's a number of different scenarios that could play out in Iran. So I'm trying to be, I think, I said the other day on a podcast someplace that, we got to be careful with Iran because what comes out of the other side might be worse. And they go, well, how could it be worse than the mullahs? Like, it could be like a Syrian civil war.
And people, quickly they're saying, well, as soon as the mullahs, the ayatollahs, and they're all gone, then they naively, in our own head, they think like we'll go back to a pre-1979 Iran, which was a very secular country under the Shah. But we don't know that. And people say, well, if the mullahs are gone, then Iran. You've heard the Crown Prince. I saw an interview of him when he was saying, like, Iran will immediately recognize Israel and be friendly and all those positive things. But there's no guarantee that he's going to be coming in and being the Shah. I mean, that's people speak of that, but like you said, there's many other possibilities, and whoever and whatever replaces the mullahs does not. It is no guarantee they will be friendly to Israel. So let's not jump the gun.
Yeah. So I just think that we both knew Chuck Missler. Chuck told me many years ago, watch Turkey, John, watch Turkey, and so I have. And it's interesting that there was an interesting article in the Eurasian Times about a month ago talking about Moscow controls the passports, but Turkey's really moving in or something like that. I can't remember the exact title. It's at the Eurasian Times. And it's interesting that Turkey is exerting its influence throughout the Central Asian stand republics, which I think is a very significant development from a Bible prophecy standpoint, and the formation of alliances for Ezekiel 38 39
Gog and
that
Magog.
and then we'll argue about when that's going to happen. But nevertheless, it's coming together. In Turkey now, the textbooks are being changed. I have this documented many times over the last year. Central Asia used to be called Central, whatever the Turkish term for Central Asia was. Now those textbooks have been changed, and Central Asia is now referred to as Turkestan because they're Turkmen, ethnic Turkmens. So when they entered in some agreements with Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan's going to come into this Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey alliance, it appears. When they took over the, they entered into agreements with Azerbaijan. They did it sort of the old fashioned Ottoman way, and they called it two states, one people, because they're ethnic Turkmens, and ethnicity is very, very big in the Middle East. So I'm just saying is there's a lot of things going on right now that I think are very significant beyond the geopolitics involved.
Yeah, well, I also wanted to talk about issues that are closer to us in the states, but I don't think we'll have time in this episode of this podcast. But I have great concerns about what's happening in Minnesota and Minneapolis, and how it's kind of starting to duplicate in different blue areas of the U.S. And it has the color and the flavor of a civil war to me, in the beginning, and it's just this.
It's shocking.
I have questions about that, but maybe we'll have to do that another time. Maybe
let me give you just a short thumbnail on that. Is go back and study what happened in Mogadishu in Somalia and the insurgency there, and you will get an idea of the literal insurgency that's taking place on the streets of Minneapolis and other cities right now with regard to ICE. This is a very troubling and very significant thing, and they have weaponized our legal system against us.
Absolutely.
I mean, people are committing crimes. They go to judges to get things signed off on to get a warrant, and the judges are not signing them. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and then this is the very thing that they're committing is, of course, what they're accusing Trump and the administration of doing, which is ridiculous. Who was it that I think it was Tim Walz over the weekend who compared something that happened to Anne Frank.
Yes. Is this not some of the most offensive things you've ever seen in your life as a Jewish person?
Yes. And tomorrow, is International Holocaust Memorial Day on January 27th every year, which coincides with the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945. So this has been declared, International Holocaust Memorial Day, different from Yom HaShoah in the spring in Israel. And so it's of course I have lost my grandfather in the Holocaust, so it's very personal to me. And Tim Walz to compare this person and saying like this is no different than what happened to making comparison with Anne Frank. It's not ridiculous. It's despicable. It's ugly. It's toxic, and it's getting worse. It's like I don't know how they're going to manage. They're sending Holman today.
So over the years, I've talked about the sermon issues of things going on in the evangelical church. And I used to use the phrase in a theological argument, the first one to play the Pharisee card is usually the Pharisee. And I would say the first one in these arguments that we're seeing now, the first one to play the fascist or Nazi card is usually the fascist or the Nazi.
Absolutely. Oh, we've seen it. I mean, that's exactly the way they're acting. Well, John, we'll have to maybe do another episode, maybe unpacking this a little more, where can people find you?
Fellowship Bible Chapel, X, and Twitter, Gettr, Telegram. I think it's usually John Haller 54, but one of them, I think it's Gettr. It's John Haller 1954.
Yeah, and I put all those things
Yeah,
on the on our video on YouTube so that people can find you and then they can harass you personally as opposed to make comments on my video that I have to give you,
right.
you know.
And
But
you and Olivier, you will be at Fellowship Bible Chapel the end of July, the last Sunday in July, I believe it is.
is this a in public formal invitation?
No, I did it. We did. Remember, we're doing that conference over in Brooksville, Ohio.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I said, well, since we don't have to pay for you to travel, please come on over, and
Come on over. Since it's a freebie, come on over. You stay as long as you want.
yeah, yes, just stay. You can help shovel the snow. Might be melted by then.
Oh, I hope. Well, it's
Just see
Ohio.
in
You
the
never know.
background.
You could get snow in summer over there.
Not usually, but until this. So the three biggest snows in Ohio, the biggest one for years was 16 inches that they got on a Thursday night to Friday morning in April of 1987. I happened to be in Arizona. We got home Sunday and everything was melted, so it was no big deal. But then about 12, 13 years ago, we got 34 inches in one storm.
Whoa.
And then this time we've got 20, 21 inches. So this is the second biggest one we've ever had in this area.
Well, John, we started the podcast with discussion about the snow. We're closing the podcast with discussion about the snow. What else can I do? I mean, we'll have to. I'm going to stay put here in Dallas. So we have not as much snow, but it's crusted to a solid sheet of ice. So people are kind of staying home for the next day, maybe 2 days. So if you're watching, wherever you're watching in the U.S., stay safe and be in a word, one eye in the sky, one eye in your Bible. And John, thank you for this
Thank you,
update.
as always.
We'll get together again very soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Shalom and be blessed.